It was fun though. It's fun to look. It's fun to look. And no, we're not talking about what you might be talking about. We're talking about an auction, folks. Welcome to the spoiler room. Thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair on this special evening of recording to talk movie spoilers. We are live here to talk about another Hunter film. So we've hunted werewolves. Okay. All right. And we've hunted witches. And tonight, we hunt vampires. Yes, that's right. But it's a historical figure who's hunted the vampires. Yes, that's right. You didn't know it, but the former president, Abraham Lincoln, yeah, he hunted vampires, if you didn't know. And this is the story. And this is my co-host, Mr. Ian Simmons, who's joined me tonight to talk movie spoilers and to discuss Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, and thank you for accommodating me. I'm going to be on vacation next week and unable to do a live stream. So, yeah, we're
Indeed.
doing double headers this week. This is a big,
I
big
know.
thrill, and I
Yeah.
am happy to talk about Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Last night, we talked about Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, a movie I
Yes.
did not like, but watching Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter today, it helped me solidify why I don't like that other movie and why I think this one got everything right that movie was trying to do. This one came out a year before, which is
Yeah.
interesting. But
Yeah, it
yeah,
is. Well, because it and that's it, I think part of the reason why you got Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters was because of the hoopla of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. This was one, it's based off the book, the film is, and I was wondering how they were going to do it because don't have a heart attack, Ian. I read the book, hardcover even, of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
you're lying.
I'm not lying. I read it. Honest. I did read it. I have witnesses. I read this because I had heard so much because I mean you remember the big hoopla over the book, and how it was that kind of started the gimmick of the alternate tellings of various things. You got because after soon, not soon, but it started that trend, and that's why eventually you got was it
It was
uh
Pride and Prejudice and
Pride,
Zombies,
yes.
right?
Pride
Yep.
and
Yeah,
Prejudice and Zombies.
Seth Graham Smith definitely had a moment right around this time that we're talking about here. Yeah, I never read the books, but
Mhm.
I'd forgotten this was based on a novel until the end credits, and I'm like, I should probably give that a whirl.
What's interesting about the novel and why I was curious about, how they were going to do this is because what's really brilliant about the book, yes, I do know a little about books, not a lot, but a little. But what was brilliant about the book for me was reading it, they did it like a straight what helped was he writes it like a straight biography book. So all the stuff he's talking about in it is kind of outrageous about the vampire Marcus, about his adventures, how the death of his parents. Obviously, it's a book; it goes more in depth than the movie, but he writes it as like straight, like just a straight biography, and that's what I loved about it is the fact that it's not like written ridiculous the way he writes it, and the tone is like, no, this is Abraham Lincoln and here's a world of vampires and here's what he did to fight and how they affected his family, and it was wild. Now it ends different than this film, but the
Hmm.
film had an alternate ending, I do believe, as well, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But the synopsis, Ian, this one pretty easy. Go ahead.
Abraham Lincoln, he's known as the 16th president, the great emancipator. Uh, yeah, I kept thinking like he's not the one who couldn't tell a lie. That was George Washington, right? But but he was known as Honest Abe.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
guess there was this whole like truth mythos surrounding
Hmm.
the founding fathers and the early presidents. But yeah, it turns out that in addition to rising to prominence in politics, he fought the undead in his spare time. Um, he befriended a young boy named Will, who's a black kid when they were both, children. They kind of survived this attack during by a slaver. They were separated for a number of years and kind of reconnected as adults. But then Will and Abe formed kind of a partnership. And then there's a trio when Abe meets Mary Todd Lincoln, or the soon to be Mary Todd Lincoln. And then there's also a store owner named Josh, who's goes by Speed. So they're there's like a quartet of people who part of them are fighting the undead and part of them have no idea what's going on. That would be Abe doing his best to, in a Spider-Man fashion, keep the love of his life out of the whole like business of fighting evil. But yeah, there's a head vampire, of course. There are minions. And the nice thing about this is they tie the Civil War allegory into it perfectly by saying that the vampires are using the slave trade as basically a food production franchise across the South and encroaching into the North. And so, yeah, it takes off from there and goes to some really crazy, adventurous places. And when I first saw the trailer for this back in probably 2011, 2012, I thought it was ridiculous. And I laughed and was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of fun. And when I went to the theater, I was surprised, as I was this afternoon, when I can still, 11 years later, got misty-eyed at the end of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. This is a real movie. It's a legitimate, I think it's got an unfortunate title, but what else the hell do you call this thing? It takes itself seriously, even though the premise is kind of ridiculous, but it's a very stirring kind of movie that I think we should see more of today. We're not going to, because this thing flopped.
Yeah.
But and it was not critically accepted. It wasn't, accepted from audience members, except for probably geeks like me and I assume you. But we'll talk about it. It's kind of, I also like the fact that, and I don't know about the alternate ending you're mentioning, but this thing is not like sequel bait. It's not like we get to the end like, oh, he actually survived and became an underground, vampire hunting sensation, and we're gonna have 6 movies about these characters. No, it's a clean break.
Which is funny, because you know damn well if this film came out within the last, say, 3 years, or dare I say even 5 years, they would have built a franchise around. They would have had a trilogy built around this. It's so
no, it would have been more than that. It would have been the DPCU, the Dead President's Cinematic Universe. They would have had like Abraham Lincoln versus the creature from the Black Lagoon, Teddy Roosevelt, Dr. Frankenstein Hunter.
Teddy No, we've got FDR, American Badass, who fights werewolves. So let's not forget that. Now I want Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, FDR, American Badass crossover, like some kind of time warp thing going on, where those two end up getting together and they fight vampires and werewolves. I want that. I want that to happen now.
I mean, if there was a superhero team of ex-presidents, FDR would be Professor X.
That's true. Yeah. Nice. Way to pigeonhole someone into a specific role, Ian. Way to go there.
It's pop cultural shorthand. That's what it is, Mark.
Cultural shorthand. Nice. So yes, we have Abe Lincoln in here, played by Benjamin Walker. And I think you're right. I think what helps sell this film a lot more than the previous one that we talked about is the fact that they play it far straighter than you expect the film with this title to have. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. They play it straight. I mean, it's obviously ridiculous and there's crazy things that happen, but they go all in on this. They make it a legit movie with a character arc. You have, I mean, they bring in actual historical references and they give it a hunter, a vampire twist or whatnot. But the thing is, it makes sense in their world, in this alternate reality they have.
It does, and I like that it's not even necessarily played as an alternate reality. I mean, I'm not a
Mhm.
history buff, but I wasn't aware watching it of any m okay, aside from the fact that we're supposed to believe the Confederate soldiers were all vampires, okay, which
There's
that's
that part.
they're
There's
they're
that part.
they're
Let's
they're taking the metaphor a little bit
yeah,
they're stretching a
yeah.
little bit there,
Sure, sure.
but I do like that this is almost like an X-Files, like, alternate history of America, like, this is the
Right.
untold story to the point where, unlike Hansel and Gretel, you're not Abraham Lincoln doesn't pull out, like, a machine gun and start, like, plowing down vampires or stuff.
No,
The
no, he
closest he
doesn't.
gets is he's got a shotgun hidden in the staff of his axe, the silver-bladed axe, which is fucking cool. Um, but yeah, it's for as incredible as it is, within the reality of this universe,
Mhm.
it all holds together.
It does, it does, and like I said, Benjamin Walker, playing it straight, Anthony Mackie, Dominic Cooper plays Henry Sturgis, who is a spoiler room, folks, this is a spoiler room. Henry Sturgis, who's a you come to find out eventually who was a vampire who is helping train Abe Lincoln to be a vampire hunter to get his revenge on the pack of vampires, the head vampire, Adam, played by Rufus Sewell, uh because that guy took everything away from him. Basically, they killed his wife, made him a vampire so he couldn't kill Adam because in this world the rule is if you were turned by a vampire, you can't kill the vampire that turned you. So you're basically a slave to them.
Well, I think it's that you just can't kill a vampire at
Well, you
all.
can't kill a
'Cause
vampire. That's right. That's
yeah,
right. You
because
can't
the
kill your
maxim
own
is,
kind. Yeah.
yeah, only the
Mhm.
living can kill the dead.
Mhm.
Um, which is yeah, it's a really nice thing because at occasion when Henry,
Mhm.
the kinda Obi-Wan figure, he keeps
Yes.
popping up in these situations with other vampires. I'm like, "Why aren't they trying to kill him?" Or he's trying to kill them because he can't, and it's illustrated well in under that flashback where we see with Henry and his girlfriend slash fiance.
Right.
They're in a carriage on the road, and Adam and his gang show up, and there's an attack, and Henry is turned like instantly. He gets bit
Yeah.
on the neck, and within like a minute, he's like bearing fangs and attacking people. But he's trying to, was it a dagger? I think he was
Yeah,
trying
it's a
to
dagger.
stab
Yeah. Mhm.
Adam, and there's like this great, the struggle to bring his fist to the guy's chest with the dagger, but then you also see there's like a force field sort of around him. That's
Mhm.
it's very well played. Um, yeah, there's so much cool stuff going on here. Again, yeah, I'm jumping all around, but like the spoiler room again, at the end, there's the big fight on the train because
Mhm.
yes, all the Confederate soldiers are vampires. The guys in the North are just regular people, so they're very clearly the good guys. They have no chance against these vampires until Abraham Lincoln decides, hey, what if we melted down pretty much all the silver in the North to make
Mhm.
munitions and send that via train? The vampires get wind of this, and so there's a big climax on a train on a giant bridge that's in flames. Turns out it's a decoy, and one guy says, "Well, how are you going to get the silver to the soldiers on the front?" And Lincoln, I think, says, "Well, there's more than one kind of railroad." And
Yes,
yes,
yes, because yes.
it was all these slaves and the emancipated black people who were basically getting the hell out of Dodge. They were slow marching down to smuggle silver to the front, which was yeah, it's just a cool idea.
Well, not only that, they run across Harriet Tubman. Harriet
Yeah,
Tubman, at one point, they get rescued by Harriet Tubman because they're on the run because Abe Lincoln, he's doing Henry's business and he's starting to get the reputation of killing vampires. And we get this wonderful scene where he tries to kill his first vampire and it doesn't go exactly well, which is nice to see. But he gets invited to the plantation where Adam is at, and there's this massive fight or whatever, and they end up getting rescued by Harriet Tubman, who's running the Underground Railroad. And yeah, they do this wonderful bait and switch. There's a wonderful triple cross, which I love because they set up the character Speed, and Speed, you could tell, doesn't exactly like Abe Lincoln having a friendship with his buddy Will Johnson because Will's black. a black man, played wonderfully by Anthony Mackie. I love Anthony. He's not on screen long, but I love his performance in here.
Yeah, it's the second Marvel cameo we have in this movie, because Dominic Cooper was also
Yeah.
in. He wasn't that a version of Howard Stark, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he
Yeah.
was. So, and so you have Speed, and he always seems a little shifty through most of this. And even when he's kind of gets a better friendship with Abe Lincoln, he still seems kind of shifty. So at one point in the film, we see him talking to the basically the general of Adam. I forgot her name, but she's just this badass vampire that he talks about the railroad. And then you come to find out that, oh yeah, no, he's acting like he's a double crossing bad guy, and then the whole audience will believe that he's a double crossing bad guy because they kind of played him shifty throughout the whole thing. But then he's actually a triple crossing because he planted the fake info to the vampires, and he actually was staying true to Abe Lincoln, knowing the plan all along.
And this is the one I think weak part of the movie, because they set it all up with the prejudice against Will, the uncertainty, the fact that Alan Tudyk shows up as a politician who's very charming in the town, and also dating Mary Todd in the beginning. You can understand those prejudices. It's the time and all that. But as he gets to know Will, he gets to know Abe, and kind of admires Abe Lincoln, becomes part of his inner circle, then you see him kind of soften. So at almost the 0 hour, like really late in the film, to see him turn heel, I'm like, because I'd only seen this
Sure.
once 11 years ago.
Oh
So I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't remember like what is going on here. And then of course, because they have the shift to like, oh,
Yeah.
now I'm working for the vampires, and then they have the triple cross reveal all within like 15 minutes. If they were going to do this, they needed to pace that out a bit more, like make it a 3-hour movie, so that you're like, instead of going like, what the fuck, I should be going like, oh no. But I was like going, what the fuck?
It is a little bit of a weak part, but I think they kind of rushed things in the film near the end, a little bit, because we do get a time jump in here. And that's what I like is, even though it says Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, and you get plenty of Abe Lincoln wielding an axe, if John Wick wielded an axe only and no guns, that would be Abraham Lincoln in this, just about.
Oh, dude, imagine in John Wick 5,
Yeah.
we go on a tour of John Wick's home, and just like family pictures and shit, and there's just like this old-timey photograph of Benjamin Walker as Abraham Lincoln.
With the axe.
Yeah, it wouldn't even have to match up. It just that'd just be for me.
That'd be beautiful. That'd be beautiful. Because there's some wonderful axe play in here that Benjamin Walker does, and he's doing it, and I was very impressed. And it's fun because we see him as young Abraham going on his hunt, and chafing at the bit to go after the vampire that killed his family, who's a slave, who's a slaver who beat him and his friend when they were kids. And he doesn't go because he promised Henry that he would do what Henry said if he trains him. So yeah, the whole kind of Obi-Wan type of Padawan.
It's very Jedi. You got no emotional attachments. You can't do this because you want revenge. All this other stuff. Yeah, it's really nice. But this Jack Bart's character, played, I think, wonderfully by Martin Selkis, who's one of my favorite like villain character actors. He's the only reason really to watch the first Triple X movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, he keeps popping up, and at one point he gets shot through with a silver ball bearing, and silver is poisonous to vampires, but it doesn't kill him. It just takes out one of his eyes. So you see him wearing like sunglasses throughout most of the film. When he takes them off, it's really gross looking. It's a nice practical effect. But yeah, I like this kind of cat and mouse game they played while Abraham is a young man.
Well, and it was obvious, folks. You already mentioned it earlier. The first time we see the slavers, Jack Bart's, the first time we see him, he is almost dead accurate in his costuming to Bram Stoker's Dracula at one point. He's got the glasses, he's got the gray suit, he's got the hat. It was like it's only brief, but you see it and I'm like, "Oh, I know what you did there. I know what you did there." It had to be intentional because I'm like, "Okay, that's a little out of period, maybe not a lot, but maybe." But he looked slick, but it's like, "That looks familiar." And then I'm like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're going for that look." So you just know right away this guy's a vampire. Um, but I like Benjamin Walker as Abe Lincoln. I thought he played Elder Lincoln fairly well. I can't tell you, I've watched this film like 4 times, and I still get a little excited when you have because at one point, folks, Abraham Lincoln decides to become a politician. He's grown affectionate towards Mary Todd, played wonderfully by Mary Elizabeth Weinstein, uh, and he's like, "No, I'm giving up the axe," and he's going to go into politics. And then we jump ahead like 20 or 30 years. I mean, it's older Lincoln, and when the Civil War starts for him, and he finds out that the vampires are involved he dusts off the old axe and seeing Abe Lincoln kind of older grab the axe and just do the little spin move like he did when he was young, even though he drops it at one point, I'm like, I got excited. I'm like, yeah, I want to see.
Yeah, and that detail that you mentioned, I think, is something that shouldn't be glossed over. He drops the
No,
axe. He
he
does
drops
the
the axe. Yeah.
kick ass like the arm twirling thing, and it
Mhm.
really does look like he's doing it. I mean, this isn't a
Mhm.
special effect. It's very well done. But yeah, he fumbles it. He drops the axe. I'm like, yes, this is what happens when you even they say like it's like riding a bicycle. If you get on a bike after not being on it for 20 years, you're gonna wobble a
Right.
bit. It's not gonna be seamless. You'll remember how to do it, but there's still gonna be some, some retraining, and they kind of capture
Mhm.
that in that moment. Um, you mentioned Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I told you that I got misty eyed at the end of this movie. My heart also swelled at other parts in this film because, yes, it's
Mhm.
Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. But in addition to having some kick ass action scenes and some nice monster effects, there's a scene where I think they're on like their first date or something, and
Yeah.
they're trying
Mhm.
to figure out who's gonna kiss who. And
Mhm.
Abraham Lincoln famously is tall as fuck, and she's shorter. She actually takes the top hat off of his head and stands on it. This beautifully yellow lit
Yeah.
moonlight scene. I was like, this is straight out of It's a Wonderful Life. That court scene by the courtship by the
Yes.
in the bushes.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's what is this doing in this movie? This is so sweet. And it's again, it's a contrast between this and most of the Hunter movies we've talked about so far.
Well, and it's a bittersweet scene too, because just as Lincoln has a chance to kind of, show his true feelings by kissing her back, he turns and because the words of not being able to have any emotional attachments because vampires could come after him hits him at that point. And it's actually, yeah, it's like this little touching, bittersweet, heartbreaking type of scene of sorts. And you're just like, wait, I just watched him hop from horse to horse. I just watched a vampire throw a horse at him, which I will say the sequence actually looked don't know if they cleaned it up for the home video release or what, but it looked far better or for the Blu-ray because I own the Blu-ray. But it
Mhm.
looked far better than it did in the theater. It actually him on the fighting in the stampede of horses against Jack Bart's is a wonderful sequence. Just
Yeah, it's exciting, and it's fun and it's unexpected. Who thinks there's going to be a drag out fist fight or wrestling fight in the middle of a stampede across the plains? I mean, it's wild. And
Jack,
and
go ahead.
what? Go ahead. I
I was
was
just
going
gonna
to say
say Jack Bart's picking up the horse and throwing it.
ridiculous, but it's ridiculous in the way that like I never thought I'd see something like that before, but in the moment in the scene, it makes perfect sense. Like you're going to use
Yeah.
what you have. But no, going back to Mary Elizabeth Winstead, one of the things I like about her, I mean, she's a great actress, but
Mhm.
in the writing of this character, this is just before we get into the era of the bad version of the kick-ass, female lead.
Right.
As
Yep.
we've talked about before, from
Yes.
the 70s and the 80s and probably even
Mhm.
earlier, we had really great empowered kick-ass female leads, but they
Yes.
didn't achieve that just by taking on the worst traits of men. um,
Yes.
Mary Todd Lincoln in this film exhibits a different kind of strength, a
Mhm.
different kind of fire, that I was so glad at the end of this, she's not like back to back with Abe Lincoln swinging axes and like shooting people, shooting vampires in the face. She's with the Underground Railroad people, like making sure that these munitions get to where they need to go. She's driving her husband to uh, essentially go after the
Mhm.
vampires that killed their son. That was a nice little bit of historical revisionism, I guess,
Yeah, I guess.
because their son did die, but it was vampire infiltrated the room. Yeah, she
Yes.
did have the shotgun moment at the end in the camp,
Oh,
but
yeah.
that was, she spotted the vampire that killed their boy and shot her through with a shotgun. Very believable.
Mhm.
She did not grow up training as Abraham Lincoln did. I mean, he didn't grow up doing this stuff, but he did
No.
have like probably a year of him training how to hunt and kill vampires. She didn't have that experience. So if I saw her like twirling around and leaping through the air and like, killing creatures of the night, I would have had some questions. But yeah, there was a nice balance in this movie of the different kinds of strength for the different kinds of
Mhm.
characters, all adding up to something that felt, as sensational as this movie is, very real.
It did. It did. Yeah, Vedoma was, played by Erin Wasson. She was the general, the female general, the one who bit, Abe Lincoln's son,
Oh.
and in this there's tension-filled moments in this ridiculously titled movie. There are actual tension-filled moments. The moment when you see Vedoma come into the White House posing as one of the servants and sneaks into the son's room, there's legit like tension, and you're just like, oh shit, are they or aren't they? And then they cut away, and suddenly you see him sick on the bed with the bites, and you're like, oh damn, they did. They actually did pull the
Well, and
trigger on that, so to speak.
well, and
Um,
as you're going through that scene, I misspoke. Mary Todd didn't want Abraham Lincoln to go and kill the vampires. I mean, not initially. What she wanted, and Henry, Abe, and Mary Todd had this conversation because Will was still hanging on to life, but there
right.
was the option of him turning so that Pet Cemetery style, she
Yeah.
could still have her son, because she loved her son so much she didn't want him
Yeah.
to die. But then they're like, look, you don't want this version of your son, so they had to
Mhm.
let him go. And Adam and the other vampires knew this. There's a version of this movie where Vadima sneaks into the room and just straight up kills the kid, and like
Mhm.
maybe leaves a calling card like, oh look, the bites on the neck, those vampires are back. But no, Abe Lincoln has to watch his son die and has to have flashbacks to when his mom was bitten earlier on in the film. This thing is way smarter than like it has
It
any
has
right to be.
It is. It really is. And we'll pull over for a minute here. We got Mr. Don Shanahan, who is in our great nation's capital. He's
Yeah.
and appropriate. We're talking Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter tonight, but he's watching. We appreciate you tuning in. He goes, I'll leave an axe at the Lincoln Memorial while I'm here in DC. He goes, I'm sure the park police won't mind a bit. I'm sure they won't, but just make sure it's covered in silver because you need that silver to kill the vampires. So if they ask you, just let them know you're leaving it there for anyone who needs to kill any vampires, and they'll accept that and let you go. Okay, just
Yeah.
they won't mind at all if you say yes. There's still vampires in DC, and this axe is to help even the playing field. They'll totally just let you go. Don't worry
Well,
about
yeah, either that or Don will fulfill his dream of wanting to appear on the news. Uh,
that.
safe travels, by the way, Don. Yeah, yeah, they show they have some nice shots of like early and late, contemporary Washington in
Well,
this movie.
it was really cool just the way the film opens. You've got the narration with Benjamin Walker as Lincoln, and he's coming in and they're going over DC, and you're like, oh, wait, that's modern DC. And then you watch DC kind of fade into, pre Civil War DC. So I love that transition and just yeah, it's the way they handle the material. It really is how you get that difference between this and many of the other kind of crazy concept films. It's all on how you play it. It reminds me a little bit, and I saw the discussion come up recently in a group about shoot 'em up. I don't know if you've seen shoot 'em up.
Oh, yeah, the Clive Owen movie?
Clive Owen one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna tread lightly here. I missed
Go
that
ahead.
conversation.
No, it was on a Facebook group. It wasn't in our group at all. It was just
Oh,
in
okay.
the
I thought you meant
no,
the
no,
EMC group.
no, no,
Okay.
no. It was on a different Facebook group. It came up on, and someone kind of pointed out how they didn't quite care for it because it's kind of ridiculous. I'm like, it was an ode send up to action films. It played on the tropes, but it played like an action film. I mean, there was a start, beginning, and end. It wasn't just skit, skit, skit. It had ridiculous things happen, but the actors were all in. And that's where I was going with this is Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. All these actors play it straight. They're
Yeah.
playing these characters, as if this is just a straight film, regardless of how crazy the concept is. And that's what helps it. It's the earnestness of this film.
And yeah, I saw Shoot 'em Up once when
Mhm.
it first came on home video. I despised that movie. Um,
That's okay.
and
I figured, but
it's partially because it is sort of like the version the dark path that this movie could have taken. I mean,
yeah.
it's a ridiculous over the top shoot 'em up,
Mhm.
but also, and I'd heard people say, oh, it's also, and maybe in the filmmaker said this, like an ode to like Warner Brothers cartoons. I mean, Clive Owen is
Oh,
literally chewing carrots like Bugs Bunny throughout the movie.
he does. He does. Yeah.
I'm like, as a Grindhouse trailer, like a parody trailer, I'll
Sure.
watch it for 2 minutes. Asking any more than that, and certainly for like 95 minutes, that's almost abuse. Um,
See,
John's got a couple more things to say there.
Don does have a couple more things to say. He says, "Shit, I'm short the requisite silver. I'm sure I can snag some from the Federal Reserve across the street. Why not? I mean, after all, you're leaving weapons around DC. Might as well just go for broke." And he goes, "They just give that out
We're
like
just kidding.
postcards
No one
there."
is leaving weapons around DC on this live stream.
Yeah, see, the Federal Reserve is giving out silver just like they give out postcards there. He goes, amazing. So there you go. In fact, I think the postcards are lined with silver. So, haha, just get a bunch of postcards and melt those down, and you got your silver you need for your axe. See, there you go. See,
Melting
that's
down postcards. I think this is called kindling. I don't know.
well, no, the silver in there. You burn the postcard and
Oh,
then you
yeah.
burn away the paper and you just get the silver. And you see, then you can dip the axe into silver and leave it at the Washington Monument. And
No
there
more
you go.
vampires, right?
And no more vampires. That's right. And you won't have to worry about yourself either. You'll have, you'll have housing. And I'm like,
Oh God.
no,
Don.
no, Don mentioned that smelting now in progress. One of these fumes. Oh dear. Yeah, you got to do it in a well ventilated area, man, not in the bathtub. Okay. Uh, but
Oh,
getting back to this historically inaccurate but so much fun Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. What was your favorite action scene in this film, Ian?
I still really like the train.
Mm,
The
mhm.
just the it's weird because I like the axe fight on top of the train before they get to the flaming bridge more than I like the flaming bridge sequence because that seemed a little bit like, I mean, I know Henry was almost pulling a Captain America grabbing the helicopter and bringing it down. Like
Yes.
he was serving as the third rail of this train to keep it from like falling down the chasm, whatever. But when Abraham Lincoln and Will are on top of that train fighting vampires and they're kind of like back to back, trading the axes, it's a lot of fun.
It
Um, and
is.
and then just the visual of them coming up on the, Vadima, she lights this giant rickety wooden bridge on fire. And you mentioned the theatrical experience. I was so glad I got to see this in a movie theater because seeing
Mhm.
that projected big the way Timur Betmakov intended it to be, it's beautiful. I'd love to see this. It's never going to happen, but excuse me, I'd love to see this on IMAX. Just I would sit on the first row. just like look up so I could experience that train scene again.
Yeah, the train sequence, even on a small screen, you could tell how it was shot and everything. It was just meant to be this kind of epic finale, and it comes across just as that. And it's played so well. You're right. Even with the ridiculous Henry strength scene, I'm like, okay, at this point in the film, sure. It's one of those things where if you pulled this early on, well, but at this point in the film, okay, Henry's holding yeah, okay, sure.
Well,
I'm good.
it's also because again, I had forgotten a lot about this movie. I knew
Mhm,
some of the broad strokes, but I expected Henry to die or to be killed,
mhm.
somehow
Right, yeah,
accidentally killed because he's the Obi-Wan figure. He's the old
right.
mentor who's meant to train up the new warrior, and then he passes away. But he
Mhm,
doesn't. And in fact, he outlives the guy that he trained. And that's the reason, I
mhm,
am gonna jump ahead to the very end of the movie for a moment, but at the end, after the vampires have been vanquished and all this other business, we go a little bit even more forward. And Abraham Lincoln is talking about, reuniting the country and moving forward and, all this other stuff.
mhm,
And then he and Mary are going out to the theater to watch a
mhm.
play. And Henry's in the Oval Office and he's alone with Abraham Lincoln. And he's like, I could still, you've got this fight and it's going to go on for a long time, but it's going to outlive you. I could change that. I could turn you.
Mhm.
We could really do something together. And Abraham Lincoln's like, no, I'm good. And it's almost like you almost think not invulnerability, but he feels like he's got still a long life ahead of him and more
Right.
great work to do. But you just realize that if he had just taken that offer, then whatever happened to the theater would not have affected him at all and changed the course of history. And it's just so very sad because Benjamin Walker in this role is so great.
He
I mean,
is. He is.
it's like I believe in Harvey Dent. I believe in Abraham Lincoln, played by Benjamin Walker. He's a genuinely inspirational figure. When he's giving those political speeches, it's
Mhm,
not just a bridge in a movie to get from one action scene to another. It's genuine, soaring,
mhm.
beautiful rhetoric that I'm like, this is a message to sound cheesy that we need right now. In this
Yes,
time, right now, we
at
need this
this time.
message of unity. Yeah.
Yeah, it's genuine. He put his all into it. He's legitimately playing this like he's playing a character Abraham Lincoln. He's playing Abraham Lincoln in a historical movie that just happens to have Abe Lincoln also dispatching vampires in wonderful action-filled scenes, but he's still playing Abe Lincoln like Abe Lincoln, like in between these scenes of action, you get these scenes that we've seen played out, and he's playing it straight historical. I'm Abe Lincoln. It's not, hey, I'm Abe Lincoln vampire and played it up. No, he's played it as if he's playing this historical figure who just happens to kill vampires. And I think that's really what helps. I mean, this director had a hot streak for a while. Part of the reason he got this was because he had Night Watch, Day Watch, Wanted, which I still love, as stupid
Hmm.
fun as it Wanted is so, I think, underappreciated sometimes when you talk about action films. Um,
I just realized that had a crazy train sequence as well with
it
the
did,
L. Yeah.
it
Mhm.
did, and then later on, a few years later, he would direct, the Ben-Hur movie, which is crazy. This director, he knows how to handle action, and he does it here, and yeah, there's such a fun appeal to this movie. It's so much better than what you would expect it to be. Now, if I'm remembering the book right, I think Abe Lincoln actually gets turned in the book,
By
but
Henry
he's still
or
yeah, but he fakes his death. He either gets turned by Henry or he accidentally gets bit near the end in the battle. He still defeats everything, but he's still I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I read the book, but I think and people can correct me if I'm wrong. I'll be happy to have the comments. I think at the end he goes underground though basically. He gets shot but he doesn't get killed but they fake his death so he could still hunt vampires because they jump ahead to like a more modern time and he's with Henry and they're actually hunting vampires, I think if I'm remembering correctly. I may be wrong, but I do believe that's how they played it. Um, but or it might have been the alternate ending I read about it. But there's also this wonderful, interesting animated film, and I don't remember if it was actually at the end of the end credit sequence or if it just came out as an extra on the Blu-ray. But there's this wonderful animated short film where Abe Lincoln, it takes place as he's hunting, a young Abe Lincoln's hunting vampires. He meets up with Edgar Allan Poe in
Whoa.
this animated short. It's just like a 7-minute short, and he talks to Poe, who tells him about the story about Elizabeth Bathory and her her significant other who went about killing virgins in town, and it's an interesting sequence. It's really kind of cool, and the
It's
animation's
on the
interesting, and
Is this on the
yep,
Blu-ray?
believe it's on the Blu-ray. I'd have to look again, but,
'Cause I
um,
have the Blu-ray. I watched the digital
uh,
version that I got with it, but I'll have to go see if that's on there. That sounds really cool.
yeah, I'm trying to remember, what it was called exactly, but it was interesting, you know, and I just thought it was a nice little added touch, but there's a lot of great touches in this. It's what a part of the thing is too is we don't get the obligatory, here's the historical monument. Here's a battle in front of, this monument, or here's this battle on the steps of the White House between the vampire hunter, kind of like you might expect, to where suddenly Adam the vampire appears in the Oval Office and Lincoln and Adam are fighting in the Oval Office, and he dispatches Adam by taking the American flag with the wooden pole on it and breaking the pole and stabbing him with the part so that when he falls down, the flag's standing up and it's floating.
Although
Now you want to
I'm not
see
gonna.
that.
Well, no, I'm just gonna say I don't want to give too much away, but in a movie that you may see very soon, there is a scene in which that happens, but it's the best version of it.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
when I get back from my vacation, we'll talk about whether or not you've seen the movie I'm referring to, and then
Okay.
I'll tell you.
Okay. Is it one that just came out or is it coming out or?
You may see it soon.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And we talked about it
Oh,
recently.
I know what you, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I might go see it. Okay. Well, yeah, I can't wait to see Mad Heidi anyway.
Okay.
One way
That,
or
that,
the other, I gathered
yes.
it.
But there's a
Uh,
version of what you just described that's in that movie, and it kicks all forms of ass.
Nice. Well, that film looks like it kicks ass too, just like this film kicked much ass. Just for everyone's reference, it's called Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter: The Great Calamity. It's one of those motion comic follow-ups to Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter novel. And so yeah, it's an interesting little short, but it's done like one of those motion comics. So you got the line drawing, but it's in 3D
Yeah.
animation of sorts, and it's a
That was
pretty cool
big.
little. Huh?
I was gonna say that was big back then. I know they did
Oh
the same thing
yeah.
with Watchmen. They did like a whole
Yep.
motion comic about like the Black Freighter, I think,
Yeah, the
and yeah.
Black Freight. Yeah, the
Mhm.
Voyage of the Black Freighter, or the Curse, whatever it was. Yeah, they did something along that lines as well. So motion comics for a while back then, but they did one for Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, but it was meant more for the book than it was for um the movie. But it did come out, I think, the same time as the movie, and so. But yeah, getting back to this film, I mean, even having Harriet Tubman show up, you're like, well, that's kind of, the gimmick, but they work it into where it makes sense why she is there. You, you know, the whole idea initially of, oh, all the plantation owners are vampire hunters, that's ridiculous. But then you think about it going, actually, that kind of makes sense. If they're vampires, they would have the money, they'd buy the land, they get the slaves because it's easy food for them. And you're just like going, okay, these concepts, I have a little tinge of reality groundedness to them.
Yes. Now there is, and I thought about this while I was watching
Mhm.
it. Not so much the first time, but watching it today. I don't
Sure.
know if this is a plot hole, so maybe you can help me out.
Hmm.
When, like, right before the big time jump,
Right.
Abraham
Yep.
Lincoln puts down his axe and he's like, I can do more effective fighting with words than with an axe.
Right.
And he goes full blown into politics. What do the vampires do for that 20 years? Because it's like, I mean, I guess they're building
Well,
up their forces and stuff, but they also just randomly stop attacking Abraham Lincoln and his family and Henry. Like, we don't. It just seems like everything goes dead for or undead for 20 years.
it does, and I think it's explained in the book. I forgot what it was because I mean he does have a big showdown and he dispatches. I think it's explained away as this because Adam invites young Abraham Lincoln to his plantation to do the kind of confrontation and see what this guy's made of because Abraham at this point before he gets his revenge on the one vampire that killed his family, he's dispatched like 7 vampires, which back then is kind of big that this one person has dispatched actual 7 vampires who thought that they could just rule the land. So Adam invites him to the plantation for a showdown, and when he by kidnapping his buddy Will, and Abraham and Will promptly dispatch the vampires at the party, most of
with
them
with help from Speed.
with wonderful help from Speed. Um, there's some iron horses, literally. You know, uh, Adam mentions how he had to use his best vampires in order to see what Abraham was actually made of, so to speak, if he actually lived up to the stories. And he does. He did not disappoint, as Adam said. So the impression almost is that Abraham and Will and Speed had kind of dispatched quite a bit of his soldiers.
Mm.
So maybe, at the time, so maybe it took him a little while to build things up, or he was looking for the right opportunity because it's not really explored too much, but I think it's one of those two where maybe also the vampires are like, well, he's going into politics. He's not killing us anymore. We'll leave him alone for now because we could kill him, whatever, or waiting for the right time to get their revenge, waiting for his kid to show up so that they could kill his kid and get, really hurt him because he was always, Adam was big on hurting Abe Lincoln, not just killing him.
I get it, but like the vampires laying low is one thing, but also, and I understand what Abe Lincoln was saying about wanting to stir more hearts and minds to the
Right.
cause of righteousness, but there are still vampires running around. And I know even though he vanquished, a handful of like the biggest
Mhm.
bad guys, it's not like just because he's, on the campaign trail that there aren't still creatures of the night out there. And it's unclear. Like
It,
Henry can't do anything to do this. It'd be interesting if they had shown in that time, maybe Henry going out and recruiting other people because Abraham Lincoln had sort of retired or something. But there is
it,
just this kind of gaping hole, and maybe it's explained in the book. I don't know. I'm going to read the
it
book
is
now.
it is covered, I think, a little bit more in the book, the time gap about how he'd run into vampires and he was able to dispatch them, I think, over the course from then to the Civil War, but they laid low. I think they mentioned it in the book how they laid low, and so he didn't go seeking them
Mm,
because he was busy on the, doing politics stuff,
yeah.
politicking. So I think they laid low for a while, and so he figured, they're not messing with me, I'm not going to mess with them, type of thing. But it's been a while since I read the book. So, oh hey, we got stuffed burritos showing up in here.
Hey,
Hey, how you doing, Gabe? And yeah, he mentions this movie received a lot of hate, from what I remember, and he doesn't know why. He thought it was fun, needed to dust off the Blu-ray and give it another watch. Yes, you do. The extras on there is, and he says, "Good to see you guys." And then we get a lot of fun star emojis, which are for the Twitch because we do broadcast on the Twitch as well. Yeah. So I mean, this film is one of the better type of ridiculous titled films. It's a film. It's a legit movie story, seriousness, some groundedness in it, even with the concept being ridiculous. it
right.
it works.
Um, And yeah, I don't know why it has an abysmally low, critic
Mhm.
score on the tomato meter, and the audience score isn't much better. I haven't gone back to read what those criticisms are because I just kind of finished the movie today to talk about it here. I think I'm going to go comb through those because it is a puzzlement. I don't know how you can watch this movie unless you're watching with your arms crossed, thinking, "Oh, this is just so stupid." I mean, Abraham Lincoln never fought vampires. Well, you know what? A guy never got bitten by a radioactive spider and fought crime either. But it's, it's a movie.
I
But yeah, it's solid stuff, and it also has a perspective, and maybe this has something to do with it, I don't know, but it's a perspective on slavery that we don't really see in mainstream entertainment, which
Mhm.
is the villain, Adam, talking about what he's doing with, the South and the slave trade and all
Right.
that stuff, but essentially castigating the people who are accusing him and his kind of doing something unprecedented. He's like, look, we're just carrying on a proud human tradition of buying and selling other people. You
Yeah.
had, Jews, you had Africans selling other Africans. So, get off your high horse, buddy. It's really kind of troublesome to watch a villain that you despise making interesting points.
He makes an interesting point because he mentions how he's like 5 or 7,000 years old, so he was around that time of the pharaohs and that, and so, yeah, he makes some interesting arguments about, before you start, like, saying, "Oh my god, this is unprecedented." Well, no, actually, it's quite precedented in our history. It's, you
And
know
what I like is that, and the movie doesn't really go into, I feel like there could be a 3-hour cut of this movie to get into some of the ideas that are just sort of toyed at here, but it makes, because he's delivering this speech to Abraham Lincoln. I
Mhm,
don't think it's a coincidence that shortly thereafter he decides to go into politics, because America, or I would say the West in general, was very unique in world history in trying
mhm.
to abolish the institution of slavery. So what he did really was kind of a revolutionary act, or the movement that he was a part of, being the 16th president. So yeah, he could see, I'm going to stop. Yeah, mankind is corrupt and evil, and we buy
Mhm.
and sell each other. Maybe we can change that, and he did.
And he did. He
Well, I
did
mean,
it.
for the
I
most
mean,
part. I mean,
for
it's
the most part,
some of that
yeah,
stuff still goes on in bad corners of the world, but
it
for the most
does.
part, we look at slavery now and it's abhorrent,
Mhm.
whereas only a few hundred years ago, like, yeah, I got slaves, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we saw that addressed, to bring it around, to what we discussed, in Skin Game.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
uh, as well,
Great callback. Yeah.
we had that, kinda dynamic as well. You have a similar dynamic between Abe Lincoln and Will here. They're a little bit more friends and on the same level than we did for our 2 in the Skin Game, but still, I mean, the spirit of there is there with the relationship.
Well, that was the other unique thing, is that, in another movie or another story, Will would have been a slave, but
Mhm.
he was born free, or he was emancipated. I can't
He
remember
was
exactly.
he was a free he was a free he was a free, he was
So
he was free. His family
he
was
was
free as well, yeah.
okay. I couldn't remember if he was freeborn or if he had,
Mhm.
but so yeah, essentially he got caught in this basically the wrong part of the country, and there were bounty hunters who were after him, and he sought Abraham Lincoln's help, and that sort of like rekindled their friendship after not having seen each other for a long time. But it reminded me of 12 Years a Slave, which came
Right.
out, I think,
Mhm.
around this. It was around the same
Mhm.
time, like maybe it was the year after this, but that was essentially that story of a northern free black man who got he ended up as part of the slave trade. And it's not
Mhm.
like today where you can say, oh, look, here's my pull up all my ID and my credentials on my cell phone. It's
Yeah.
like, can you prove it?
Mhm.
What do you mean? Gone. There's 30 years of your life just, wasted in torture and slave labor, literally.
Yeah. No, I actually, if I remember correctly, he actually escaped. That's what he may have, he was freed. No, he was freed. That's right. He was a freed because that was the big deal of he was freed, but they still thought he was a slave, and that's why the bounty hunters were going after him,
Hmm.
because he was free, and still, yeah, I love the dynamic between, and the fact that, again, something that you don't always see, even though Abe Lincoln is the title hero, quote unquote, in this film. You're right. When we get to this train scene, there's a wonderful sequence where he's back to back with Will, and he's trading off his signature weapon to Will, and Will is holding his own with the vampires as well. It's not like, Abe Lincoln is the top guy with skills, and Will can't fight. Will can fight just as well, and these two are tossing the axe back and forth to fight, and it's a wonderful sequence. And if you look underneath the surface of what they're displayed there, that's actually pretty cool to have in a film like this.
Oh yeah, they are working. There are two races working together to destroy the personification of hate.
Exactly.
Mark, why wasn't this movie Oscar nominated? Like, what the hell?
It's hard to say, but I think, and I haven't looked up much criticism, and I did a fun little review of this film when it came out. I did it in black and white. I wore kind of a top hat type thing. I did it like an Abraham Lincoln speech was my review. You can check it out on YouTube if you want something to laugh at. But I thought it was all right. I enjoyed it. I after reading the book, I was like, okay, they left out some parts, but I thought they did well with what they had. Trying to adapt a quote unquote biography to film is always a challenge to begin with, whether it's a fictional biography or not. So, I think they did well. I enjoyed it even more this time around watching it. But I think people just can't get past the title and the initial concept when you read like the synopsis or something online. I honestly think people have that kind of preconceived notion and feeling, so that sometimes can skew even subconsciously how you receive a film. And I think that's what it is here. With Abe Lincoln being so iconic, I think a lot of people had trouble separating the makeup story, the alternate version, the Elseworlds, to this 11 years ago. Nowadays, I think if this film comes out, you get some polish and some tightening. I think it's better received today than it is 11 years ago.
There might be something to that. It also could be that, for as much as I like this movie through and through, when we get to the later sequences with the adult Abraham Lincoln,
Yeah.
they do a good job of putting the makeup on,
Yeah.
Benjamin Walker to make him look like Abe Lincoln, but it's almost
Mhm.
too good a job because you
Yeah.
get to that bit where at the end he's swinging the axe around like, oh, this is the guy from The Penny, like killing vampires. There's that little thing in your head. You're like, oh, weird.
Yeah. And I think that's what it was. I think it was a little too weird for when it came out, you know. And I think that's part of the thing. The landscape of many things have changed, including concepts for films that are accepted by mainstream audiences and even mainstream critics. But
Mhm.
that's because some of those folks who were 12 and 13, God, I feel old. I feel, here comes my really old arteries hardening. Where's my Geritol moment? But many of those preteens and tweens and such that were around when this film comes out are now in their 20s and have grown up in a different cinematic world than you and I did during our age at that time, to where more kind of ridiculous and outrageous concept films have been more better received because you've grown up with that type of film in mainstream and having it being accepted over the years versus when this came out, the people were still a bit on the fence with some comic book films. I mean, they were impressed by Marvel, but at the same time, they were like, "Yeah, how long is this? How is this gonna? You know what I mean?" So it was an interesting landscape when this came out.
Yeah, I wonder people's heads would have exploded and be like, how long is this comic book movie fad gonna last? Oh, you've got at least another decade. Like, what?
Yeah, about that.
Oh man.
Because what? when was Avengers?
2012. Yeah, so it was the same year as this.
2012. So it's the same year as this. So there's another thing, So I mean, the culture, the pop culture, and the mainstream, what they consumed for films, as far as like ridiculous, was still a little bit in the gray area of being acceptable. I mean, the MCU was an exception, especially in its early years. But even then, some of those films weren't exactly the best received. They're better received now than I think they were when they were first came out. A couple of them, because you saw where the phase 1, 2, and 3 went. But still, I think this film was just a little bit too early to be really like accepted, and for people to kind of look at it with a separated eye and go, "Oh, this is like an Elseworlds. This is like an alternative. This is like a what if."
Yeah.
And I think maybe if it comes out 5 to 7 years later, it's a little bit better received.
Maybe. I think in 25 years after this movie is out, so I can't do math, but it's sometime in the future. It'd be nice to get like a reevaluation.
It would. A
Of
re-release.
this.
There you go. It needs a 15th anniversary. It's coming up soon. Give it a 15th anniversary edition of it. So there you have it, folks. Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, Fourscore. And about an hour ago, we started this podcast. And we will be ending it here tonight. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Thank you, Stuffed Burrito, Mr. Don Shanahan of every movie has every movie has a lesson at 25 years.
Film Obsessive now. 25 YL
and film.
Like,
sorry, yeah, 25 YL ago, but Film Obsessive now. Check out Don's stuff. Stuffed Burrito. If you're watching this on Twitch, check out Stuffed Burrito Entertainment. Thanks for tuning in. He's got a lot of great stuff. He streams video game play. Guy is a lot of fun to watch, so check him out. And now I'm done with shilling our folks who tuned in today live. I've got a live person right here, Mr. Ian Simmons. You get the license to shill. Please shill away.
Thank you. Well, first I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, especially because we have Don here tonight. I don't know if he's still watching, but Anthony Mackie's character in this movie, his name is Will Johnson, who is the other half of the Cinephile Hissy Fit podcast. So, and I know he's also a huge Marvel fan. So yes, Will, in an alternate reality, you were played in a movie in a way by the Falcon.
There you
and
go.
Captain America.
Captain America. So there you go.
But no, I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. You can find me at kickseat.com. But better place to find me right now is YouTube at Kicking the Seat. We do movie reviews and live streams and interviews and all that stuff. And you can find me here on Mondays and sometimes Tuesday nights. But yeah, if you're around this Wednesday, meaning tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a quote unquote roundtable review. We'll see who all shows up for Transformers Rise of the Beasts. Thursday night, we're going to be doing a review of The Flash. And then I'm off next week. I'm front loading backloading, getting ready some evergreen content. So you won't be deprived while I'm away. God, that sounded arrogant. But yeah, that's my deal.
Be deprived of your dose of Ian. You can't do without your dose of Ian for the week.
I certainly can't.
Yeah, so check out his stuff and enjoy your vacation. I don't know what you're gonna do with yourself, but it's
what
you're gonna be like
a family trip.
No, it's a family trip. So keep yourself distracted with family, so you're not sitting there going, "Where's my microphone? I need to podcast." No,
believe me, it was a discussion. Like, they're gonna have Wi-Fi, honey. I could bring my setup.
You're a brave man. You're a brave man to approach your wife and say, "Honey, I know this is a family vacation. You think I could bring my podcast stuff?" You are a brave man. Mad props for that.
I got about 6 words in, and then I got the look, and then I knew not to finish that sentence.
You got the look. Hey, honey, could I bring my you want to pass me the butter, please?
I needed it because I almost got reamed.
So hope you've enjoyed this discussion, folks. Yes, specialmarkproductions.com. If you aren't already aware, thank you for tuning in. Next week we won't be live for the podcast. That's why we're doing this kind of double back-to-back thing, but there will be content. I've got a interview with the director creator of a film that's not actually coming out till July. It's a film about a killer gator. So you'll want to keep an eye out for that. Should be interesting. I'm going to get a very privileged chance to see it early, but I can't review it or really talk about it until July. But I get to talk to the director about the film. So that's going to be fun. That's going to drop this week. And yeah, we got a bunch of reviews I got to catch up on. So that might happen next week. So thank you. Oh,
Oh,
yes.
wait, before you go, Mark, we talked about it last night, but I gotta continue pimping it. Folks, if you haven't watched Mark's interview with Felicia Day, definitely check that out on his channel, because it's a really great, half-hour piece talking about Red Werewolf Hunter and many other things. There's a lot of great insight about her career and some of her experiences, like personal life and working on movies. It's really awesome stuff.
It was a fun perspective, and it was a very frank discussion, and I was very appreciative of it quite a bit. And yeah, check it out, folks. It's been a lot of fun. It's gaining some traction out there too. So thank you so much, everyone. And I would just say good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.